This is Epicurus, he's a philosopher, and these are his lists of principal doctrines. So let's hear what he has to say. The blessed and immortal is itself free from trouble, nor does it cause trouble for anyone else. Therefore, it is not constrained either by anger or by favor, for such sentiments exist only in the weak. Whoa. Death is nothing to us, for what has been dispersed has no sensation, and what has no sensation is nothing to us. The limit of the extent of pleasure is the removal of all pain. Wherever pleasure is present, for however long a time, there can be no pain or grief, or both at once. I think you can have pain and grief, or both at once. There can be no pain and grief, both at once. You can have pain and grief at the same time? What does he mean? Pain does not dwell continuously in the flesh. Extreme pain is present but a very brief time, and that which barely exceeds bodily pleasures continues no more than a few days. But chronic illness allows greater pleasure than pain in the flesh. No, it doesn't. Cancer is painful and slow, and I don't see how you can get any pleasure from that, even if you get cured from it. Extreme trauma will make your neural pathways different in your brain, so I would disagree. It is impossible to live pleasantly without living prudently, well, and just, nor is it possible to live prudently, well, and justly without living pleasantly. The man for whom this latter condition is impossible cannot live prudently, well, or justly. He for whom the former is impossible cannot live pleasantly. Okay. Seems like he's going back and forth a lot. Whatever you can provide yourself with to secure protection from men is a natural good. Heck yeah, Second Amendment, baby. Some men wish to become esteemed and admired by everyone, thinking that in this way they would procure for themselves safety from others. Therefore, if the life of such men is safe, they have received the good that comes from nature. If it is not safe, they do not have that for which they struggled at first by natural instinct. So our natural instinct is to be safe. Yeah, I agree. It's one of them. No pleasure is evil in itself. Yes, it is. But the means of obtaining some pleasures bring in their wake of troubles, many times greater than the pleasures. Yeah, pleasure is evil in itself. For example, if someone has pleasure in decapitating cats, that would be evil. I think Epicurus today, if he lived today, he would change that perspective. He'd have to go visit some death row inmates, the violent ones. Let's see what he says about that. If every pleasure were condensed and existed for a long time through the entire organism or its most important parts, pleasures would never differ from one another. If the things that beget pleasure in dissolute individuals could dispel their minds' fears about the heavens, death, and pain, and could still teach them the limits of desires, we would have no grounds for finding fault with the dissolute, since they would be filling themselves with pleasures from every source and in no way suffering from pain or grief, which are evil. Wait a minute. If the things that pleasure in dissolute individuals could dispel their minds' fears, well, pleasure doesn't dispel fear automatically. You could be jumping out of a plane and feel fear and then go back to pleasure and then go back to fear. I don't know if you mutually can't feel fear and pleasure at the same time. You'd have to do a lot of different circumstance experiments with that to see if that's true. If apprehensions about the heavens and our fear lest death concern us, as well as our failure to realize the limits of pains and desires, did not bother us, we would have no need of natural science. What? We would realize the limits of pains and desires do not bother us. Would have no. Just because we wouldn't have those sensations doesn't mean that natural science wouldn't have value. Natural science's value isn't dependent on our fears and desires, I'd argue. It is impossible for anyone to dispel his fear over the most important matters. If he does not know what is the nature of the universe, but instead suspects something that happens in myth, therefore it is impossible to obtain unmitigated pleasure without natural science. What does natural science have to do with dispelling of fear? So that he's trying to say that if we weren't afraid, is he saying that fear is the starting point that natural science builds off of, and that we use natural science simply to dispel our fears via inventions? And that in order to dispel our fears and our suspicions, we use myth, he's saying here. But that it's impossible for us to get rid of our fears over the most important things, especially if we don't know the nature of the universe. But now that sounds, didn't he just say that if we didn't have fear, there'd be no need of the natural universe? But the nature of the universe, I mean, it's deeply related to human consciousness. You'd really have to explain more. Maybe he will. There is no benefit in securing protection from men if things above and beneath the earth, and indeed all limitless universe, are made matters for suspicion. That's not true. Just because an earthquake can happen doesn't mean that me seeking protection from a security guard in a dangerous war zone isn't beneficial. You know what I mean? You could take this... No. Just because the earth in and of itself has natural elements that will kill us doesn't mean that I won't receive any type of benefit or positiveness from securing myself via protection from other humans. That's like saying police officers aren't needed because they can't really help against an earthquake. That doesn't... Remember, Epicurus is an ancient philosopher, so if he could live today, he'd have a lot more different things to say. The most perfect means of securing safety from men, which arises to some extent from a certain power to expel, is the assurance that comes from quietude and withdrawal from the world. The Quakers would agree with that. The Buddhists would agree with that. The Taoists, Marcus Aurelius would agree with that. I agree with that. But I wouldn't call it the perfect. He's almost saying that via self-reflection, we can make ourselves feel more safe and secure and expel that fear in our bodies, and we'll have more of a power. And the way we do this is through withdrawing from the world and being in silence. So sort of meditating. I think going into the void of your consciousness and self-reflecting is important. But I wouldn't say that makes you secure, because a monk could be meditating and he could be in total connection, and someone could come along with a machete and whack his head off. He's not more safe. I mean, he's safe from his maybe minute fears of, like, I'm not thinking about a rattlesnake slithering up my leg and biting me and poisoning me, right? I'm not thinking about a black widow spider coming and biting me, right? I understand absurd fears, but he's pointing out the minute fears that is like the probability is so low. But it depends on where you are, like where you are, your geographic location. So I'd have to disagree with this, because if you're in a certain geographic location and it's not really the best place to sit down and reflect and disconnect from your surroundings, you could get some serious punishment. Natural wealth is limited and easily obtained. The riches of idle fancies go on forever. Well, I wouldn't say riches are easy to obtain. In a few instances does chance intrude upon the wise man, but reason has administered his greatest and most important affairs and will continue to do so throughout his whole life. Chance intrudes on the wise man, but reason is administered his most important actions and will in his whole life. So yeah, chances happen to everyone. Like chances in like a lucky opportunity, an opportunity essentially. But I don't see how that would connect to or show evidence of reason being the sole administrator in the most important affairs. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're like going through a litigation, if you're looking at a contract and you have to use your best reason to negotiate, yeah, that's going to be one of your great important moments, but what does that have to do with about like is he saying wise, being wise is more, I get it, yeah, it's more connected to reason. Those two are, you can't be a wise man without having reason. You can't have reason without being wise. But what does that have to do with chance? Right? So yes, we all know chance is once in a while, and that maybe reason shows itself more in the human consciousness than the opportunity of chance, but I don't get how those two are related. And they both participate in his life. I mean, why are you pointing out the obvious? It's like saying a man will see a blue whale very few times in his life, but he will fart more times. Like, come on, like, what is going on? The just man is most free of perturbation, while the unjust man is full of the greatest disturbance. You can be just and be miserable. I mean, the one who dispensed the justice could carry home the agony of it. So just because you're just doesn't mean you're free from that, from harassment, from any type of negativity. And a man can be completely an unjust man and be full of happiness, right? Being just and unjust doesn't mean that your mood is dependent upon that. You can be, there's a lot of corrupt cops who are acting unjustly and will find moments of happiness. So I don't know if I agree with that premise of him. What do you think, family? What do you think about Epicurus so far? He's got some things, you know, he's an interesting read. This was a gift from one of my classmates to me, an old man. He was really deep into Buddhism, so I would definitely have no problem with calling him a Buddhist. But he's really skinny, and he's a funny guy. But he gave me this because he knows how much I love philosophy. It's really cool.